The shattering of porcelain and the splat of birthday cake hitting the patio floor changed my family dynamic forever at 46. My daughter-in-law smirked, dropping a fake, defiant, "Oops." She had no idea that the moment I tossed her $2,500 purse into the blazing fire pit was the exact second I incinerated their parasitic empire. Never confuse a mother's patience with submission. Welcome to how I eradicated the parasites from my life. Hello, listeners of James Revenge Stories. Thank you so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating and paying our hardworking staff. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our team can pay their living expenses and keep creating these stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or clicking the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. My name is Maya Stone, and at 46 years old, I thought I had built a life insulated from petty, high school drama. I am a self-made senior executive at Aegis Horizon Logistics. It took decades of grueling, 70-hour work weeks, missed holidays, and relentless corporate battles to carve out my sanctuary. That sanctuary is a peaceful, sprawling suburban home with a backyard that feels like a private luxury retreat. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of everything I had built and survived. String lights cast a warm, golden glow over the immaculate stone patio. Soft jazz music played from the hidden surround sound speakers, and the evening air smelled of roasted pine from the fire pit and the expensive catered barbecue my closest friends and colleagues were enjoying. It was an intimate, joyous gathering, buzzing with genuine laughter and the musical clinking of crystal wine glasses. The absolute centerpiece of the evening was a magnificent, custom-made vanilla bean cake, resting elegantly on a vintage porcelain serving table. But the inviting warmth of the evening abruptly chilled with the arrival of my 26-year-old son, Leo, and his 25-year-old newlywed wife, Chloe. They were intentionally late. It was an entrance deliberately designed not to join the celebration, but to disrupt its rhythm entirely. Chloe strutted through the wooden side gate like she was walking a red carpet at a movie premiere, demanding all eyes be on her. Her chin was tilted so high up, I was genuinely surprised she did not trip over the garden paving stones. While everyone else was dressed in comfortable, elegant backyard attire, she wore a ridiculously tight, flashy outfit more suited for a loud nightclub. More importantly, she kept aggressively swinging her left arm, practically shoving her brand-new, garish designer handbag into the personal space of my guests. She wanted everyone to notice the absurdly expensive accessory. She craved the desperate envy of my friends. The evening progressed despite their toxic energy. Eventually, my friends gathered around the patio, their smiling faces illuminated by the soft, dancing light of the outdoor fire pit. Someone joyfully started to call for everyone to gather around and sing the birthday song. I stood near the head of the table, smiling warmly, feeling a rare and profound moment of complete contentment. Chloe decided that my happiness was simply unacceptable. She marched right past the dessert station. It was a wide, open patio with plenty of room to navigate, but she deliberately veered incredibly close to the edge of the serving table. With a sharp, heavily calculated thrust of her elbow, she struck the base of the porcelain cake stand. The sound of the heavy porcelain shattering violently against the hard stone patio was deafening. It instantly silenced the jazz music. It violently choked out the laughter. My beautiful birthday cake was a ruined, splattered mess of vanilla frosting and crushed sponge scattered all over the ground. Chloe did not gasp in shock. She did not frantically apologize. She simply paused her stride, looked down at the pathetic wreckage at my feet, smirked with pure malice, and delivered a cold, flat, "Oops." Then she just kept walking toward the seating area, leaving a heavy, suffocating trail of stunned silence in her wake. She casually dropped her prized handbag onto a vacant lounge chair and turned back to look at me, clearly expecting me to burst into hysterical tears or start screaming like a madwoman. She desperately wanted a theatrical scene. She wanted to play the victim of an evil mother-in-law's unhinged rage. I refused to give her that satisfaction. I did not yell. I did not shed a single tear. I felt the muscles in my jaw locked tight, my face instantly hardening into a mask of absolute freezing calm. I walked right past the ruined cake, the sharp crunch of broken porcelain under my heels serving as the only sound in the dead quiet yard. I walked straight to the lounge chair. I reached down and picked up Chloe's prized possession. The thick leather felt heavy in my grip, smelling faintly of expensive boutiques and unearned arrogance. Without breaking my stride or my terrifying silence, I pivoted directly toward the roaring outdoor fire pit. The orange flames were licking high, bright, and intensely hungry. I extended my right arm over the blazing center and simply opened my hand. The designer bag plummeted straight into the inferno. A massive shower of orange sparks flew high into the night air as the hungry flames immediately began melting the expensive hardware and consuming the luxury leather. A collective gasp ripped through the paralyzed crowd of guests. Leo lunged forward from the shadows, his face twisting into an ugly mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "Are you insane?" he screamed, his voice cracking wildly with rage. "You are paying for that! I will make you pay every single cent for that!" I slowly turned away from the dancing fire, letting the intense heat warm my back, and looked my son dead in his eyes. I kept my voice perfectly level, a quiet, deadly storm that easily cut right through his pathetic, childish screaming. "Send me the bill," I replied smoothly, not blinking once. "But first, ask your wife why she decided to destroy the special day of the person who is feeding you both." The next morning, the house was perfectly still. At 6 o'clock sharp, I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of black coffee and opened my personal laptop. Sitting right at the top of my inbox was an email from Leo. The subject line was just the word "unforgivable," typed in all capital letters. I clicked open the message. It was a sprawling, multi-paragraph manifesto of pure entitlement. He demanded exactly $2,500 transferred to his checking account by the end of the business day to replace the destroyed handbag. If I refused, he threatened to cut all ties with me permanently, vowing that I would never see them again. But the truly fascinating part of his digital tantrum was the second half. He went on a long, pathetic rant about how completely exhausted and financially drained he and Chloe were. He claimed they were barely surviving, eating cheap ramen noodles and pouring every waking hour and every single dime into his logistics technology startup. He painted a tragic, bleeding heart picture of two hardworking kids sacrificing everything for their future, cruelly oppressed by an unsupportive, abusive mother who cared more about a cake than her own flesh and blood. I did not type a reply. I just stared at the glowing screen, letting my decades of corporate instincts take the wheel. Something was fundamentally wrong with his narrative. The math simply did not work. If they were truly bleeding money for a startup, how on earth did Chloe justify parading around with a brand new ultra-luxury purse? And more importantly, where did her brazen arrogance come from? People who are desperately broke and entirely dependent on your charity do not usually smash your birthday cake in front of your closest friends and colleagues. They grovel. Chloe had acted like she held all the cards. I decided it was time to look under the hood of their so-called struggle. A year ago, I had handed Leo the keys to a stunning 2-bedroom penthouse I owned in the financial district. I allowed them to live there completely rent-free so they could focus entirely on building his business without the crushing burden of a downtown lease. It was a highly secure, luxury high-rise equipped with a state-of-the-art smart home management system. Because my name was on the deed, I still had the master administrative access to the digital portal. I opened a new browser tab, logged into the building's management dashboard, and pulled up the entry logs for the penthouse unit. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. If Leo and Chloe were actually living there, I should have seen 2 distinct digital key fobs swiping in and out on a regular daily schedule. Instead, the screen was flooded with dozens of temporary, single-use access codes. The digital smart lock on the front door was being programmed remotely, generating new passcodes every 2 to 3 days. I switched over to the internal network logs. The penthouse router showed a constantly rotating list of unrecognized mobile phones and laptops connecting to the guest Wi-Fi network. They were not living there. They had never moved in. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I opened another tab and searched the major short-term vacation rental websites. It only took me 5 minutes to find it. There it was, my pristine, strictly residential penthouse, listed under a fake host profile named Luxury City Stays. They had uploaded professional wide-angle photos of my custom designer furniture and my marble kitchen. They were charging $850 a night, strictly violating the Homeowner Association's absolute ban on short-term leasing. They had secretly turned my million-dollar property into an illegal, high-turnover party hub, quietly pocketing thousands of dollars in pure profit every single week while I paid the property taxes and maintenance fees. A cold, dangerous calm washed over me. I opened a fourth tab. It was time to look at the startup. When Leo originally pitched his business idea to me, I had agreed to act as his angel investor, setting up a joint business banking account where I deposited a substantial seed fund on the first of every month. I logged into the bank portal and pulled up the transaction history for the past 6 months. There were no payroll expenses. There were no software licensing fees, no marketing invoices, and absolutely no server hosting costs. The account had been systematically drained. Almost every single dollar of my investment had been funneled out through massive, untraceable wire transfers to shady, offshore cryptocurrency exchanges. The account balances were practically zero. My son was not a struggling tech founder working 70-hour weeks. He was a degenerate gambler, throwing my hard-earned capital into volatile digital coins and internet scams, hoping to get rich quick without doing a single day of actual honest work. I sat back in my chair, the bitter taste of my black coffee perfectly matching the situation. Suddenly, the events of the previous night made crystal clear sense. Chloe dropping the cake and flashing that wicked smirk was not an impulsive act of a spoiled brat. It was a highly calculated display of power. It was the supreme arrogance of a parasite who firmly believed she had successfully conquered the host. She and Leo thought they had built an invincible secret empire using my assets. They looked at me and saw a blind, aging bank account who would just keep signing checks, too naive to ever verify the ledgers. They thought they were the untouchable masterminds of a brilliant con. They forgot that I built my entire career on finding supply chain anomalies and ruthlessly eliminating liabilities. I closed the laptop gently. The investigation was officially over. It was time for the execution. I did not issue a warning. In the ruthless corporate world of global logistics, when you uncover massive internal fraud, you do not politely alert the perpetrators to your discovery. You immediately and violently secure your assets. I picked up my phone and bypassed the regular building management office entirely. Instead, I dialed the personal cell phone number of the head of security for the high-rise. Within 10 minutes, I had my lead IT security engineer from Aegis Horizon Logistics on a secure conference call with him. Working in perfect lethal synchronization, we initiated a complete system override on the penthouse. We permanently purged every single temporary access code from the smart lock network. We deactivated the master digital key fobs that Leo and Chloe possessed. By midnight, that million-dollar property was digitally fortified into an impenetrable vault. Absolutely no one was getting in or out without my explicit, real-time administrative authorization. Next came the financial guillotine. I opened my private banking portal and systematically dismantled their artificial lifelines one by one. I initiated an immediate and total freeze on the joint startup fund. I transferred the remaining few scattered dollars into an isolated escrow account and ordered the bank to close the joint ledger permanently. Then, I moved to my personal credit dashboard. I clicked the small red trash can icon next to Leo's name, instantly revoking his authorized user status on all 3 of my platinum backup credit cards. As a final touch of administrative housekeeping, I logged into my automotive insurance provider's website. With 2 simple clicks, I canceled the premium comprehensive coverage policies for both of their leased luxury vehicles. I did not send an email to notify them. I did not send an angry text message. The absolute silence of the severed strings was going to be deafening, and the anticipation of their downfall was a deeply satisfying nectar. The immediate, catastrophic consequences hit them the very next afternoon. Around 2 o'clock, my phone pinged with a priority notification from the rental platform monitor I had discreetly set up. A new party of illegal, high-paying vacation renters had arrived at the penthouse, luggage in hand, expecting a luxurious downtown weekend getaway. Instead, they found a dead, unresponsive keypad. The digital smart lock blinked a harsh, solid red light of denial. According to the furious messages rapidly flooding the fake host profile, the guests were stranded in the public hallway. They were violently angry. They immediately left blistering one-star reviews, demanding full monetary refunds and aggressively threatening legal action for blatant fraud. I could only smile as I imagined the sheer, unadulterated panic tearing through Chloe's mind at that exact moment. She was physically trapped outside her own illegal operation. She could not access the unit to clean up the previous tenant's mess. She could not let the new wealthy guests inside, and she could not retrieve whatever personal items she had stashed there to maintain the illusion of residency. Her secret lucrative cash cow was suddenly slaughtered, and the angry clients were breaking down her digital door. Exactly 45 minutes later, my secure office desk phone began to ring. I let it ring 3 times before casually glancing at the caller ID display. It was Leo. I let it go straight to voicemail. He called back instantly. This time, my executive assistant buzzed in on the intercom, her voice laced with mild confusion, stating my son was on line 1 and frantically claiming it was an absolute life-or-death emergency. I knew exactly what kind of financial emergency it was. He was likely sitting in some absurdly expensive, 5-star downtown restaurant, desperately trying to impress one of his phantom cryptocurrency investors over heavily overpriced Wagyu beef and imported truffles. The server had probably just returned to his table, holding a sleek black leather check presenter, politely but firmly informing him that his premium platinum card had been unequivocally declined. I pressed the blinking green button, picked up the receiver, and leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my executive corner office, watching the busy, ignorant city below. Aegis Horizon Logistics, Maya Stone speaking, I answered, my tone dripping with crisp, professional elegance. "Mom, what is going on?" Leo hissed frantically through the receiver, his voice reduced to a desperate, panicked whisper. I could clearly hear the faint clinking of fine crystal glassware and the soft hum of sophisticated restaurant chatter in the background. "My card just got declined in front of a major business partner. I need you to unfreeze the account right now. The banking app says my access is completely revoked. You are humiliating me in public. Fix this, please." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my imported sparkling water. "I'm afraid I cannot do that, Leo," I replied smoothly, my voice completely devoid of any maternal warmth or sympathy. Upon conducting a comprehensive audit of my financial investments this morning, I discovered massive, undeniable discrepancies. Therefore, the Bank of Mom has officially gone bankrupt for fraudsters. "Fraudsters? What are you talking about?" he stammered, the false, arrogant bravado shattering instantly into pathetic pieces. "Mom, the waiter is standing right here. Just wire $500 to my personal checking account right now so I can pay for this lunch. We can fight about the birthday cake later." "There is no fight, and there will absolutely be no wire transfer," I stated, the cold finality in my voice ringing out like a heavy judge's gavel striking wood. "Your fake tech company is officially dissolved. Your illegal hotel business is locked down tight. I highly suggest you ask your very expensive, brand-name wife to start washing dishes in the back kitchen to cover your tab. You need to figure out how to survive in the real world now." Before he could utter another pathetic, whining syllable, I calmly placed the heavy receiver back onto the cradle, severing the connection and effectively cutting him off from my empire forever. Chloe was completely addicted to the digital dopamine of her fake life. Without daily access to the marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows of my property, her highly curated social media presence was rapidly starving to death. She had built an entire online identity around being a wealthy, self-made entrepreneur's wife. Being locked out was not just a minor inconvenience. It was an existential threat to her carefully crafted digital empire. Her desperation quickly mutated into absolute delusion. 3 days after I electronically sealed the unit, my building security system sent a silent, automated alert directly to my phone. Someone was attempting to physically bypass the reinforced steel door. Chloe, unwilling to accept her sudden eviction from high society, had actually hired an unlicensed, underground locksmith to drill through the mechanical backup lock. She broke into my home. She committed a felony just to host a ridiculous networking mixer for her brand launch. In her twisted logic, she probably convinced herself that since she was married to my son, she possessed some inherent, legal right to the space, regardless of the digital locks or the fact that she had never paid a single cent towards the mortgage, the property taxes, or the exorbitant monthly maintenance fees. She truly believed that if she could just get inside and broadcast one more glamorous event, she could manifest the wealth she was pretending to have. I waited exactly 24 hours to make my move. I wanted her to feel secure. I wanted her to invite every single shallow, clout-chasing friend she had in the city. By Saturday evening at 7 o'clock, the illegal gathering was in full swing. Through the hidden security cameras I had reactivated earlier that morning, I watched the absurd spectacle unfold in high definition. The sprawling living room was packed with nearly 40 people. The space was littered with glowing ring lights, tall aluminum tripods, and people holding their phones at unnatural angles to capture the perfect, flattering lighting. They were drinking cheap, sugary, sparkling wine poured into my expensive crystal flutes, and nibbling on heavily discounted supermarket appetizers arranged carefully on my imported marble serving trays. Chloe was the absolute center of attention, wearing a painfully tight, sequined dress that looked incredibly uncomfortable. She was loudly boasting to a group of 20-something micro-influencers about how incredibly hard she and Leo had worked over the past 5 years to afford such a breathtaking, panoramic view of the city skyline. She laughed loudly, tossing her hair over her shoulder, acting like a titan of industry. She even had the audacity to set up a massive smartphone on a professional stand right in the middle of the room, actively live-streaming the entire event to her 50,000 eager followers. The comments on her screen were likely pouring in, praising her success, begging for her secret to wealth. Completely blind to the fact that she was standing on a floor she did not own. She was at the absolute peak of her fabricated glory. It was the perfect moment to pull the rug completely out from under her. I stood in the marble hallway outside the unit, smoothing the lapels of my tailored navy blue suit, adjusting the heavy gold watch on my left wrist. Standing right next to me was Marcus, the most ruthless and highly successful real estate broker in the metropolitan area. He held a thick stack of glossy promotional brochures, his face set in a look of mild, professional amusement. I had briefed him on the entire situation, and he was more than happy to facilitate an aggressive, immediate listing. I gave him a quick, sharp nod. I reached out and firmly gripped the heavy brass handles of the double doors. I did not knock. I did not politely announce my presence. I pushed the doors open so forcefully that they slammed against the interior walls with a loud, echoing crack that instantly killed the loud pop music pulsing from the wireless speakers. The sudden, violent noise whipped every single head in the room toward the entryway. I stepped over the threshold, standing tall, projecting the absolute, terrifying authority of a woman who actually owned the ground they were standing on. Chloe froze mid-sentence. The glass of sparkling wine in her hand trembled slightly. The color violently drained from her heavily contoured face. I did not look angry. I looked absolutely radiant. I projected my voice clearly and cheerfully, making sure it carried to the very back of the room and straight into the microphone of her live-streaming smartphone. "Good evening, everyone," I announced brightly, gesturing broadly with a welcoming smile. Welcome to the official emergency open house. Please come on in, grab a brochure from Marcus here, and feel free to inspect the crown molding. We are highly motivated to sell this gorgeous $2 million property by the end of the week. A heavy, suffocated silence fell over the crowd of influencers. They looked back and forth between me and Chloe in utter confusion. Marcus stepped in right behind me, diligently handing out the glossy folders to the bewildered guests nearest to the door. I walked casually right into the center of the room, stopping directly in front of the broadcasting camera. Yes, unfortunately, this gorgeous unit is hitting the market far earlier than expected, I continued, speaking directly to the thousands of digital strangers watching online through her glowing phone screen. We simply had to clear the property out because the deeply ungrateful, financially illiterate squatters who were living here entirely rent-free decided to run an illegal vacation rental operation, drain their investment funding into fraudulent digital currencies, and commit criminal trespassing by drilling through my locks today. We just cannot have desperate criminals occupying a premium luxury space, can we? I turned my gaze slowly, deliberately panning across the faces of her so-called friends. So, if any of you actually have the $2 million required to purchase this view, rather than just using my furniture for your photo shoots, Marcus is ready to take your offers right now. The collective gasp in the room was physically palpable. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The carefully constructed illusion of Chloe, the successful, wealthy socialite, shattered into a million humiliating pieces live on the internet. Her digital audience was witnessing her ultimate, undeniable exposure. The reaction from the guests was immediate and brutally self-serving. These were not loyal friends. These were people who traded on reputation. Being associated with a broke, fraudulent squatter who was currently being publicly humiliated by the actual owner of the penthouse was digital suicide. Panic set in. The frantic sound of snapping tripods and zipping designer bags filled the room. People began speed-walking toward the exit, desperately avoiding eye contact with Chloe. Some mumbled awkward, incoherent excuses about leaving their ovens on, having sudden family emergencies, or suddenly remembering prior engagements. They practically trampled each other trying to squeeze through the double doors, eager to put as much physical distance between themselves and the radioactive fallout of Chloe's lies. Within exactly 4 minutes, the bustling, glamorous party was reduced to an empty, echoing shell. They abandoned her without a single backward glance, leaving their half-empty glasses of cheap wine sweating on my expensive tables. Chloe was left standing completely alone in the center of the massive living room. Her arms hung limp at her sides. Her mouth was slightly open, but her vocal cords completely failed her. She was entirely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of her public destruction, standing completely still in the ruins of a fake life she could no longer pretend was hers. The live stream was still running, broadcasting her utter, pathetic silence to a deeply entertained internet. The fallout from the penthouse disaster did not take long to reach my front door. Exactly 48 hours later, the illusion of Leo's bravado completely collapsed into raw, feral desperation. I was sitting in my suburban living room, reviewing quarterly logistics reports, when the heavy oak front door practically rattled off its hinges from a violent, frantic pounding. Before I could even stand up, the door swung open. Leo stormed into my foyer, his eyes wild and bloodshot, his designer shirt wrinkled and stained with nervous sweat. He was not alone. Trailing closely behind him was a heavily sweating, nervous-looking man in an exceptionally cheap, ill-fitting gray suit holding a battered leather briefcase. Chloe dragged herself in last, looking entirely hollowed out, her former glamorous aura replaced by the stark terror of impending poverty. Leo marched straight to my coffee table and aggressively slammed down a thick stack of papers. "We have you now," he snarled, his voice trembling with a chaotic mix of fear and misplaced triumph. "This is my legal counsel, and this is a legally binding 10-year residential lease agreement for the penthouse, complete with your signature. You committed an illegal, retaliatory eviction. You destroyed my wife's brand. You are going to reinstate our access immediately, and pay us $500,000 in punitive damages, or we are dragging you into civil court and publicly destroying your corporate reputation." The fake lawyer nervously shifted his weight, refusing to make direct eye contact with me. I did not even bother picking up the papers. I simply glanced at the blatantly forged signature at the bottom of the top page. It was a pathetic, amateurish attempt to copy my handwriting. "A 10-year lease," I repeated softly, letting the silence stretch until the air in the room felt suffocating. "That is a very bold move, Leo, especially considering the people you currently owe money to do not care about civil court." Leo's face twitched. The false confidence instantly evaporated. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, though his voice lacked any real authority. I calmly opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a sleek, black, leather-bound folder. I tossed it directly onto his fake lease. When I audited the startup fund, I did not just stop at the bank statements. I hired a private forensic accountant to track exactly where your cryptocurrency investments went. It turns out, you did not just lose my seed money. You tried to chase your losses. You tried to buy the dip. I opened the folder, revealing a stack of highly sensitive, deeply compromising financial records. "You went to the underground market," I stated, my voice completely devoid of emotion, cutting through the room like a surgical scalpel. "You took out a massive, unregulated, high-interest loan from a syndicate that operates entirely outside the legal banking system, $250,000 to be exact. And to secure that kind of dangerous cash, you needed collateral. You needed a guarantor." I slid the primary loan document across the glass table. "You forged my signature as the primary asset holder to prove you had wealth backing you. But the syndicate demanded a living, breathing co-signer, someone they could legally and physically hold accountable if you vanished." I shifted my gaze from my son's terrified face directly to his wife. Chloe was staring at the paper, her chest heaving. "Look at page 4, Chloe," I instructed sharply. Chloe lunged forward and snatched the document. Her eyes wildly scanned the text. A guttural, horrifying sound escaped her throat. There, at the bottom of the page, was her own authentic signature. "Leo told you that was a standard corporate incorporation document for the new business, did he not?" I asked, watching the devastating realization crush her. "He needed your signature. He deliberately set you up. You are the sole legal guarantor for $250,000 in dangerous underworld debt. If he defaults, and he already has, they do not come after the fake company. They come after you." The silence that followed was heavy and violently explosive. Chloe slowly looked up at her husband. The look in her eyes was no longer the arrogant smirk of a spoiled girl. It was the pure, unadulterated hatred of a trapped animal. "You used me!" Chloe screamed, her voice shattering the quiet neighborhood air. "You told me we were building an empire. You told me that paper was just to put me on the board of directors. You made me a meat shield for your gambling addiction." Leo backed away, raising his hands defensively. "Chloe, listen to me. I had a foolproof system. The market just crashed unexpectedly. I was going to pay it back before anyone noticed." "There was never a system!" she shrieked, launching herself at him. She shoved him hard against the wall. The fake lawyer quietly grabbed his briefcase and sprinted out the front door, abandoning his clients entirely. "You are pathetic. You never had a real plan. I married you because you said your mother was leaving you millions. I covered up your pathetic lies. I stole the deposit money from the illegal renters just to pay for my clothes because you were completely broke." "Oh, you want to talk about lies?" Leo roared back, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of red. "You are nothing but a gold-digging parasite. You only cared about the penthouse. You spent $20,000 of the business money on cosmetic procedures and designer bags while I was drowning in margin calls. They were tearing each other apart right in my living room. The ugly, vile truth of their marriage was spilling out in a chaotic torrent of curses and vicious accusations. They had absolutely no loyalty, no love, and no foundation. The moment the money disappeared, they turned into vicious predators, eagerly devouring each other to survive. I stood up slowly and walked over to the large bay window overlooking the front yard. The screaming behind me was deafening, a pathetic symphony of two frauds blaming each other for their inevitable ruin. Then, a new sound pierced through the chaos. It started as a distant wail, quickly growing louder and more urgent. The flashing reflection of red and blue lights began to bounce off the walls of my foyer. The sirens of multiple police cruisers wailed as they abruptly pulled into my long, circular driveway, their tires screeching against the pavement. The sudden noise paralyzed both Leo and Chloe. They stopped screaming. They stared at the flashing lights outside, their faces completely drained of blood. "Mom!" Leo whispered, his voice cracking with sheer, profound terror. "What did you do?" I turned to face him, my expression completely neutral. "I am a senior corporate executive, Leo. I have a strict legal and ethical obligation to report major financial fraud, especially when my name and assets are criminally implicated. I handed the forensic accountant's entire dossier over to the Financial Crimes Division 48 hours ago. The fraud, the forged signatures, the illegal short-term rentals, the wire fraud to offshore accounts. I gave them absolutely everything." Heavy, authoritative footsteps pounded against the front porch. The doorbell rang with violent urgency, accompanied by loud knocking. "They are not here for a civil dispute," I stated clearly, picking up my empty coffee mug. "They are here to make an arrest." The terrible, suffocating weight of reality finally crushed whatever delusional hope they had left. The game was entirely over. The curtain had violently fallen on their pathetic play. The uniformed police officers stepped through my front doorway with practiced, chilling efficiency. They did not raise their voices, but their sudden presence instantly drained the remaining oxygen from the room. Leo was promptly read his rights, his hands swiftly secured behind his back in cold steel handcuffs. He looked back at me as they walked him out, his eyes wide with the desperate, silent plea of a little boy expecting his mother to magically fix his broken toy. I simply looked away. While the police were actively escorting my son down the driveway, Chloe was already executing her ruthless exit strategy. She did not stay to defend her husband. She dragged an oversized, wildly overstuffed designer suitcase straight down the hallway and out the side door. The moment the financial pipeline was permanently severed, her marriage certificate became worthless paper. She scrambled out into the night, diving into an idling rideshare vehicle waiting by the curb, abandoning her ruined life to find her next wealthy host. Exactly 1 month later, the immediate legal and financial dust had finally settled, leaving behind a landscape of absolute ruin. Leo had been released pending his criminal trial, but he was a hollow ghost of his former self. He had absolutely nothing left. The underground syndicate had aggressively seized his remaining personal assets. The fake technology startup was officially dissolved. His wife had immediately filed for an expedited divorce, and his professional reputation was entirely obliterated. He was completely broke, entirely homeless, and drowning in a sea of insurmountable debt. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when I saw him slowly dragging his feet up my long, circular driveway. He looked physically broken. The arrogant swagger was completely gone, replaced by the heavy, sunken posture of a defeated man. He collapsed onto his knees right on my front porch, pressing his trembling hands against the reinforced glass of my outer screen door. Tears streamed down his face, leaving dark streaks of dirt on his pale cheeks. He sobbed uncontrollably, begging me to let him inside, pleading for his old childhood bedroom, asking for just one more chance to start over and be a real family again. I stood on the other side of the secure screen, looking down at the young man I had raised and supported for his entire life. The maternal instinct to comfort him briefly flared up in my chest, a deeply ingrained biological response, but I forcefully pushed it down. True love requires unyielding boundaries, and I was entirely done being collateral damage in his selfish, destructive life. My voice was incredibly soft, yet it possessed the sharp, unforgiving edge of a freshly honed blade. "I love you, Leo," I said quietly, looking directly into his tear-filled eyes. "But motherhood does not include sponsoring criminals or betrayal. You are 26 years old. It is time you pay the price for your own life," he wailed loudly, reaching out to claw at the metal mesh. But I did not hesitate for a single second. I firmly grasped the heavy brass handle of the solid oak door and swung it shut. The loud, heavy click of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed across the empty porch, permanently locking him out of my sanctuary. I walked away, leaving his muffled cries to fade into the quiet suburban night. I walked straight into my pristine kitchen and poured a generous measure of premium gin, meticulously mixing my favorite evening cocktail with fresh lime and cold tonic water. I carried the heavy crystal glass out to the backyard patio. The evening air was crisp and incredibly clear. I walked over to the exact spot where the ruined birthday cake had violently fallen exactly 1 month ago. The stone was completely spotless now. I struck a match and tossed it into the outdoor fire pit, watching the bright orange flames roar to life, casting a warm, comforting glow across the yard. I sat down in my plush patio chair, taking a slow, deep breath. I took a sip of my cold drink and smiled. The absolute silence of the yard was the most beautiful sound in the entire world. My life had finally been purified. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our story today here on James Revenge Stories. We would absolutely love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and tell us your location. If you found today's story entertaining and valuable, please consider supporting our channel with just $1. You can easily do this by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the secure PayPal link provided in the video description or the pinned comment. Your generous $1 donation provides our hardworking staff with the budget they desperately need to pay their living expenses, feed their families, and continue creating these high-quality stories to serve you. Thank you again for your incredible support, and have a wonderful day.